Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We will start the webinar and I'll share the screen. Okay, so good afternoon again, and thanks a lot for joining today's webinar organized by Prescient on identity security posture with Identity Confluence. I'll quickly take you through the agenda for today's webinar. We are going to keep it crisp. We are going to have a webinar for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we will have the question and answer session of 5 minutes towards the end. We will start with the introductions. We will understand why identity matters more than ever in today's world. Then we will look at what exactly is the meaning of identity security posture. And then we will come to how Identity Confluence, which is TechPrecient's identity and governance platform, can help you manage your identity security posture. Identity Confluence doesn't just help you measure the posture score, but it also helps you strengthen your identity security posture. So we will look at both the aspects, and we will also look at Identity Confluence in action towards the end of the webinar. Let me quickly start with the introductions. I am Kanchan Patwardhan. I am Chief of Operations at Prescient. I have almost 25 years of experience in IT industry, and most of that is into identity security domain. I have worked on a lot of IGA platforms, have done a lot of implementations and migrations of IGA platforms in big enterprises. Today I have with me Mukesh Rathod, who is Chief Technology Officer of Prescient, and I would request Mukesh to quickly introduce himself.
Hey guys, hi, I'm Mukesh Rathod. I have around 21 years of experience, have been associated with Prescient for almost 7 years. And generally, my background is that I've been doing product engineering work around identity security and data. That's been my kind of focus areas. Thanks everyone. Kanchan, I think you can take over here.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Mukesh, for the introduction. And now let's start with the webinar. So let us understand why identity matters more than ever in today's world. So there are a lot of socio-technological reasons behind it, and we have actually seen a lot of socio-technological shifts in the last few years. Companies have a major cloud adoption. We all are using SaaS applications. Then the workforce has started doing a lot of remote work, and there is a tremendous rise of AI in past couple of years. Because of all these changes, the perimeter of security had changed. It's not a physical security that only matters now, not just network security and firewalls, but identity has become the new perimeter of security. It literally takes one compromised identity to cause a massive data breach in the organization. Basically, and when you think of identities, it's not just human identities. We also have to think of non-human identities. There are a lot of service accounts that we use. There are agents in the agentic AI applications. There are bots all around us. And all these non-human identities, if we don't take care of them, the attackers can use them to cause the data breach. Almost 80% of breaches today involve misuse of identity in some shape and form, and that is the reason why organizations have to safeguard their identities more than ever in today's world. Now let us very quickly look at what exactly is the identity security posture, right? So if we want to define the identity security posture in single sentence, it is the measure of how well an organization can safeguard identities, streamline governance, and satisfy compliance mandates. So basically, identity security posture consists of three major pillars. The first pillar is all about lifecycle management. So all of you must have heard of JML, joiner, mover, leaver use cases. So employee joins the organization. To perform day-to-day job functions, he or she needs certain accesses to applications. If the employee stays with the organization for longer, then he will not stick to the same role forever. He will change the departments, he will change his job functions, and obviously accesses to different applications will be required. And finally, if the employee decides to leave the organization when he resigns, we will have to ensure that his accesses are revoked. So basically, all these life cycle events in the journey when employee joins till he leaves, we have to manage all these life cycle events, and that forms the first pillar of identity security posture. The second pillar is all about access governance. So whether the organizations are following least privilege principle, are SOD policies defined, are the organizations having role based access control or policy based access control, attribute based access control, all these aspects, they form the second pillar, all about access governance. And third pillar is about compliances. So you must be knowing that industries like BFSI, healthcare, they have very stringent, crucial compliance needs because they have very critical data about their users. But not just the organizations from these industries. In general, organizations these days have to follow ISO SOC 2 standards. And these standards need a very strong, stringent reporting around who has access to what. So, do organizations have proper reports for all their identities, all the accesses of the identities? Are the organizations having good identity observability? Are the user access reviews being done periodically? So all these aspects will become the third pillar of identity security posture. Now you can compare identity security posture with the fitness tracker that we all wear. So this fitness tracker would keep on measuring your steps taken, your calories burnt, then maybe your sleep pattern. So similar to that, identity security posture has different parameters, and we have to continuously keep on measuring all those parameters across these three pillars so that we are very well aware of our security fitness. Now let us take a very quick poll. So I would like to ask all of you, how do you currently measure identity security in your organization? So we have four choices. We don't measure it at all. We measure it, but it's ad hoc or manual. We do have certain IAM IGA tools, but it is not consolidated. And fourth option is we have a very well-defined posture score or metric. So maybe now you can take a minute and you can choose the way your organization today is measuring the identity security. So I would request the host to open up the poll, and then all of you can try and submit the score, the option. Yeah, maybe like 30 more seconds. Okay. So I believe most of you would already have given your option. So I would request host to maybe close the poll, and if you can share the result. Yeah, okay. So if you see, it's pretty evenly distributed in the first three choices. So 22% are saying that we don't measure it at all. 31% are saying that it's ad hoc or manual. 38% are saying IAM and IGA tool is there, but it's not consolidated. And only 9% have very well-defined posture score or metric. So if you see the fourth option, which is the best option, we have got very less percent for that. And the other three, which are sort of in the trending upwards order, but still, I mean, we are seeing that almost 22% are not measuring it at all. So it very clearly indicates that identity security posture, though probably people understand the importance of it, it's not really getting measured with the required priority. Now, let us hear the story. Why exactly the posture matters? So, imagine a situation where there is a contractor, that person joins the organization. He is supposed to work on an internal tool for the organization. And to deploy this tool, he needs privileged access to the cloud environment of the organization. He is given the privileged access. The tool gets built, the job is done, The contractor moves on, he leaves the organization. But everyone just forgets to disable the identity that was created for him. Now, few months down the line, this same identity gets compromised. The attacker enters into the network of the organization. This identity already has privileged access. So attacker can download some sensitive information and can very easily plan ransomware attack. Now, what has happened in this situation? Attacker is not using any sophisticated hacking tools. He has not broken the technology barrier. But what is the root cause? The root cause is that weak security posture, inability of the organization to review and monitor accesses of identities. So basically, this is one hypothetical example that we took. But I'm sure that all of you must have heard the stories of data breaches in very well-known organizations and how those organizations were impacted financially due to those data breaches. So that is why the strong identity security posture is a must for the organization because it helps to prevent breaches. It helps to minimize insider threats. It avoids fines. And it's not just about the financial impact. The most important is the brand trust, brand credibility. So more than everything else, it helps you preserve the brand trust. And that is the reason you owe this to your customers, to your partners, to your regulatory bodies. We keep on talking to a lot of customers, and there are some very common identity security related issues that we have observed. Orphan accounts. So there are people have accesses to applications. People leave the organization, but no one bothers to delete the accounts which are created for those who have left the organization. Those become orphan accounts. People have accesses to applications, but they are not being used for months. Those are dormant accounts. Organizations are ignorant about principle of least privilege. Taking an example of production deployment, certain person needs privileged access to production environment so that deployment can be done. Production deployment probably happens just once in 2 weeks, once in a month. But this person is granted privileged access through the lifetime. People are ignorant about this fact. There is a lack of visibility into entitlements. There is so much identity sprawl, access sprawl, so many human, non-human identities in large enterprises that senior management is completely losing the visibility into who has access to what. There is missing identity observability in the organizations. User access reviews are being done. There are policies around that. Managers do get notifications every quarter, but are these reviews really useful? Probably not. Why? Because managers are not having enough information so that they can do these reviews with a proper information. Their decisions may not be correct. Many a times for complex applications, just by looking at the name of the entitlement, manager has no clue as to what sort of accesses is my subordinate getting into the application because of this entitlement. And that is why user access reviews just remain for rubber stamping. There is very poor MFA coverage across applications in the organizations. There are policies which are defined, but policies get violated and they are never getting corrected. So people are ignorant about that fact. So many identity security posture related issues. With this backdrop, let us have another show of hands. And I would want all of you to tell me, will your organization pass an access review audit today if it is done without notice? So again, take 30 seconds and maybe whoever thinks that your organization will pass an audit if it's done without notice today, just raise your hands. Yeah, so I'm not really seeing a lot of people raising their hands, right? So I guess a lot of people are of the opinion that their organizations may not pass the audit if it's done without notice, right? And these are the reasons where Identity Confluence, which is the modern IGA platform built by Tech Prescient, will come into picture. Identity Confluence would help you across all the three pillars, which basically form your security posture. It will help you in identity lifecycle management. It will help you in access governance and also in enterprise compliance. So now I would request Mukesh to show Identity Confluence in action, and I would hand it over to him to take it ahead.
Hey, thanks, Kanchan. So, guys, let me share my screen. You guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. So, okay. Before we move to, I mean, I don't have a lot of slides, so I won't bother you with those. But before we go to the actual live demo, right? I just want to reiterate what Kanchan said, right? She talked about posture issues. So, at the core of it, with Identity Confluence, what we do is we we measure posture across five core signals, right? Orphan identities, escalated privileges, compliance violations, MFA coverage, dormant, right? These are five of them which Kanchan talked about, right? We don't have UAR because I think it's more of a process issue. And we have also added NHI, which is your bot service account API keys, right? As this is an emerging risk factor that we are seeing in the industry. Right? So these are all five plus an extended NHI signals that we are looking at, right? Now, what we will do is we'll look at Identity Confluence, and we will kind of first get into how we track these core signals for measuring identity security posture. And then we'll go to the dashboard, which gives a 360-degree view of all these security posture signals rolled up into a seamless dashboard, which is actionable. Okay, so with that, I'll just go to Identity Confluence, right? The first thing that we will do is we'll show reconciliation, right? This is the reconciliation screen. So what do you mean by reconciliation, right? We start with, here we highlight, right, orphan accounts with no owners, elevated privileges, role mismatches. These are often the biggest audit red flags, right? And we can reconcile and revoke access directly for him here. So these are all my connected applications in Identity Confluence, right? And I can see that how many users are in sync, how many of them are an orphan, how many of them have permission mismatches in across various application ecosystem that I have connected to, right? Let me take an example of Salesforce, for example. I already have it open here, right? Salesforce, right? What I see is these are the users which are in sync, right? These users have permission mismatches, right? You can see that, okay, this user should have access to commerce as a commerce admin, but he has an additional access of commerce session in Salesforce. So again, this is an elevated privilege that this user has. This can be fixed right from here, right? We can update the user permission to match what he is supposed to have. Then we look at orphan accounts, right? Biggest risk. These are people who, these are accounts which were created by biasing uh, the identity source, or these are people who have left the organization, right? How do you fix it, right? We can deprovision the user here, right? We'll talk about non-human identities in a bit, but these are accounts the other way around, which should have been present in the system in your application, but they are not. So Abhijit Ray, again, a case of broken provisioning system, right? Something was broken by provisioning this user, and this user Abhijit never made its way to the application, right? So he is not able to use the system. So now let's talk about NHIs, right? So what is an NHI, right? We talked about it's an API, bot, and service account. These are important. These are needed for integration purpose, right? So what we can do is we can classify. So we can classify this account if it is a machine account or machine used for integration, right? We can classify it, assign it an owner, right? We can classify whether it's used as a shared account, it's an application account, right? What is the purpose of this? And more importantly, we can assign an owner to it, right? So that this account in itself is tracked by the system. So we already have a mechanism where you can look at or manage all non-human identities that are present in the organization. So things like rotation of password, we can track people who are responsible for rotating the password, uh, making sure that these human accounts have the least privilege, because these are used for integration, right? So we should ensure that these security usage, their usage from the security point of view is tracked. So what we looked at is three core signals, right? Permission mismatches, orphan accounts, and non-human identities. Now we'll look at how do we track policy violations, right? So what we have within the system is we have policy management, right? For example, you can define a policy saying if you are an Oracle, I mean, if you are from India, right, you should not have access to administer or admin access to the US instance of Oracle Fusion, right, which is the ERP system, right? Why? Because these are regulatory requirements, right? From from the standards perspective, as well as from the regulatory frameworks, government bodies, right? So you can define these policies, right? You can define segregation of duties uh, as policies, right? If you have certain role within the system, you cannot have the other role, while it's just like the maker and checker, right? So you can define policies within the systems, right? But more importantly, what we can do is we can look at the violations, policy violations. As you can see here, right? These are all the policy violations that we have within the system, right? This user violates the policy that was defined, right? This is the policy. This is the policy name, right? Customer care agent compliance is the policy that these users, set of users are violating. So this is another core signal that we track within Identity Confluence. Other than these, what we do is we track MFA coverage. So all users that we have onboarded from the identity source, we track if they have MFA enabled or not. Also, if they are connected to, yeah, or they are an SSO based application, we can track their usage, which user has logged in which application at what point in time, which will give us a lot of security insights, including dormancy, right? If that user is not account used for a certain period of time. So now what we will do is all of these signals now finally roll up into a 360-degree dashboard. This is where leaders can look at posture health across both human and non-human identities with drill down for analysts to take action. So I'll go to the dashboard, right? This is where our story begins, actually. So this gives you a 360-degree view, right, of uh, snapshot across both human and non-human identities, right? Uh, you can see how there are 401 orphan accounts that are present in the system. 76 have, this is up by 76, right, in the last 7 days. It's an indicator of provisioning gaps that we have within the system, right? We have 781 risky accounts, right, which are flagged as high risk, which means that they have either excessive entitlements, no MFA, or they were part of the policy violation, right? We have zero dormant account, good sign, right, which means that we have kind of fixed this issue, right, in terms of dormancy, right? We have revoked access from users who were dormant, right, which means that they did not need them, right? uh, Policy violations, right? There are total 26 policy violations, no change in the last week, right? So again, this gives you an overall 360-degree, real-time view, right, of how your posture looks like across the core sectors that we have talked. Right? Now, coming to the next section, right? IC not only shows your current posture, right? It also highlights critical action that needs immediate attention, right? In this case, we have 61 orphan accounts that were detected for Active Directory, right? We have, uh, okay, we have a lot of orphan accounts. So there were some errors while we were reconciling with Jira, so that needs to be looked at, right? We have some entitled mismatch in Zoom, right? So this is probably a case where an admin needs to look at, right? So this is where we kind of show where immediate attention is needed by a security analyst, right? Not only that, right? We also measure improvements, right? On on the actions that are taken by the system. This not only helps to see what only the problems, but the progress. This is where we can see the progress. The 29% entitled mismatch was reduced from 29% to 19%, right? So which means that the admin took care of the drifts, right, and corrected these accounts. Let's go to the next section, right? Uh, Okay, posture is not static, right? We have to measure it continuously, right? So, and in Identity Confluence, we do that, right? We have three, I mean, on this chart, right? And we are looking at a very small subset of the charts that we can produce. I mean, we have within Identity Confluence. So in this case, right, we are looking at your risk score, right? If you look at it, right, your risk score is reducing over a period of time. Your MFA coverage has increased over a period, I mean, has increased over a period of time until this point where we onboarded a lot of users, right? And it dropped drastically, right? And your policy violation, if you see, right, it has decreased over a period of time, right? In the last 3 months, your policy violations have decreased, right? So this is again a good news, right? In terms of we are taking care of all the policy violations that were reported by the system. Now let's go to the next section, right? Which is your automation, right? Just, just a second. Right. This talks about your identity automation metrics, right? It is not part of the core security posture that we talked about, the core signal. But if you look at it, right, 52% of your account provisioning is based on policies, which is actually a good sign because these are not manual approvals that are submitted in the system, right? And these are policies, org level policies through which the provisioning happened. The the bigger the percentage for this policy based provisioning, right, the higher is the lesser is the security risk, right? 50% of your access is certified, right? Even not only this, right? Even what we track is reconciliation and remediation, right? How, I mean, both of these, right? This kind of shows not just posture issues were identified, but what percentage of them were closed. This is an indicator of closure of issues reported from Identity Confluence, right? Now, all of this, I mean, gives you it's a good indicator for leadership, right? On how your security posture has been trending, not only how, right? Where are issues and where we need attentions. Now, I'll go to the next section, right? This is where we talk about human identities here, right? How many privileged users you have in the system, right? How many of them have role mismatches? What is your enforcement of MFA, right? As I said, right, we kind of onboard a lot of users towards the end, so the MFA coverage really went down. Again, dormant accounts, good sign. In case of non-human identities, right, we see that we have tracking 14 NHI accounts. 13 of them have elevated privileges. Something that we should reconsider in terms of review the access for these 13 accounts, whether they really need those elevated privileges, right, to perform or they follow the least privilege principle. Right? 13 of them have access to sensitive data, which means that we should have stricter policies enforced, and maybe they should be reviewed like every 30 days. Their password or API key should be rotated more frequently, right? And 400 of them, 400 accounts are orphan and they are unmanaged and potential unmanaged accounts that we need to kind of look at and target them, right? To bring that in the ambit of Identity Confluence management. Let's look at the third one, right, which is your compliances. On the compliance side, right, we can see that there are 103 active violations, right? And no SOD violations, and 7 remediation actions that were taken, right? So this ties posture metrics directly to compliance audit readiness, right? We'll not go through all the other tiles that we have on this dashboard, but to give the gist of it, right? What we are doing is we are measuring, we are surfacing identity risk, measuring the improvements that we have made, and this is more on a continuous basis, right? What I'll do is I'll move to the last slide where we wrap up, right? So essentially, the theme that we have is you cannot improve what you cannot measure, right? And within Identity Confluence, the identity security posture management makes identity posture measurable, actionable, and reportable, right? The key takeaways that we have, right, is, we have continuous visibility within our dashboard. We measure identity health. We have direct links to remediation, right? And we also have a board level KPIs within our dashboard, right? So just to recap, right? In Identity Confluence, we look at the posture across human identities with orphan account, role mismatches, MFA gaps. We also extend this to non-human identities like bot service accounts. We talked about it, right? On the compliance side, we track policies, SOD violation with the direct remediation actions, right? And finally, we looked at custom security events and posture trends, right, within the dashboard that not only just talks about risk, but how they have been persistent within your system over a period of time, right? So all in all, right, this makes it measurable, actionable, and continuous. I'll take a pause here and then we can open it up for Q&A.
Yeah. So, Yatin, we can unmute. People who have questions might want to raise hands so that the host can unmute those people.
Yes, Kanchan, I have a question. So you
Sh-
talked about the risk score in Identity Confluence, right?
yes.
So how is that calculated?
Okay, so I can take that up, right? So risk score, right, we talked about 5 core signals, right, that we have within the system, right, which is uh, your entitlements, right? Those 5 core signal plus your entitlements, your dormancy, your uh, account, nature of your account, whether it's a privileged account or does it have access to sensitive data, right? All of them combined together uh, is the risk score. And this is defined not only at the tenant level, but this can be defined at an application level. So for example, Salesforce might have a different risk score based on the entitlements than your LMS application, right? So basically, in a nutshell, we have some core signals that we look at it. We can define this formula at an org level as well as at the application.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Madhav has raised his hand next. Madhav, you want to ask the question?
Maybe, yeah, host needs to unmute him.
Meanwhile, I
Okay,
have a question.
am I audible now?
Yeah, you are, Madhav.
Okay. So typically, I'm from security background. So typically, the principle of RBAC, so role-based access control, on a similar front, when we are managing the identity, and if we are managing those identities based on the group instead of managing it through individual, do you see any potential area where a particular, let's take an example, I have a domain admin role where I do access to do domain level administrative activities. Now there are say couple of users, member of those groups but some of them really does not do any domain level administrative activities. But the risk remains there because those are the member of the group which has the higher privileges. So do we really capture such a, I would say, leaks kind of thing where user is a member of a particular group, but at individual level, that user is not performing the role that group is supposed to perform.
Right. So essentially, I can take that content. So essentially, what we are looking at is uh, a role, a group of people have who are supposed to perform certain business function or business role, right? Or and they are not actually reviewed regularly, right? In terms of whether the group remains valid or not, right? So I mean, we can, I mean, in general, from IGA perspective, right? And we have not talked about identity automation in this. The focus of this webinar was more security posture, right? But we also have a concept of business role and members of business role, which will assign you or add you or manage the group level permissions for those users. And these users, when this business role is reviewed or we have an UR because it's a critical, I mean, it seems that AD controller admin, right, is like a critical risk role. So we will have to continuously review this from the app owner's perspective, has to review this, right, on a continuous basis. That will close for some of the security risk, because these accesses need to be reviewed and are reviewed from the system. So we have this UR feature. Plus, if it is one-off case where your admin needs access, we also have a time-bound access request that a user can raise, which is approved by the manager once he needs to perform admin level tasks within your application. So these are two core things that we have within our system that can help reduce this risk. Reduce this risk level.
Okay. So you mean if I have few users which are kind of redundant, being the member of that group, we can review and filter those out.
Yes, we can review them, right? And the system will enforce that they are reviewed on a periodic basis, right? Like, for example, if it's an admin level access, right? It may be, I mean, your org can define, right? But you can say that this group needs to be reviewed every month. So we can schedule that review, right? Plus, if it is one-off cases, right, then, I mean, and it's not a day-to-day basis task, right, for admin function, right? Then we can have a time-bound access request that is raised, approved. Once the work is finished, his access would automatically be removed from the system, from that system, right? And all of this would be automated.
Okay. So there is so little, probably not sure if relevant, but do we have provision or can we do it like as you said, we have automation. So if we can we have a pattern based auto trigger kind of thing? Like for an example, I have three users for a say admin group, and one of the user is not performing the task he's or she is supposed to, and eventually it gets auto detected and kind of quarantined or kind of raise a ticket or a flag about the need of review kind of thing. Is there
Yes.
a scope to do this level of
Yes.
automation?
Yes. So you looked at a dormancy, right? I mean, that is the whole reason we
Mhm.
have dormancy framework, right? People who have access, dormancy means people who have access, but they are not using it, right? In your case,
Mhm.
people have access to admin access to your domain controller, but they are not using it, right? So dormancy
Mhm.
access recommendation is what will will be the core signal that gets into an actionable intelligence that we have built, right? That would kind of feed that information, and based on certain parameters, right, that action would show up on the actionable dashboard, on your dashboard, that okay, this user, these set of users in this application have not used the application for last 30 days. It's an elevated role or privilege, right? And you need to act on it, either review their access or revoke their access.
And
Oh,
in addition to this dashboard, right? So we have a feature which we call as intelligent user access reviews. And as part of that, whenever such dormant accounts come for reviews to the manager, manager can actually see the rich information around whether these people are really using these accounts. So when the person has last logged on to this account, how many times he has logged on in last, say, 90 days. So all this rich information is available to the managers, and managers can take informative decision based on this information, whether the person can continue the access or access has to be revoked.
And Madhav, in a
Okay.
way, this is the core crux of the system, right? Surfacing excessive privileges that you are not using, right, is again, as you said, right, is a core part of the security posture management.
Yeah, actually. Actually, couple of years back, if you remember the days of Windows XP, the solitaire game had used to run in a system privileges. Whenever this comes to this level, I always remember that. Anyways, this is what I wanted to. I have a couple of questions, but let's others ask their questions, and if time permits, I'll ask the questions, or otherwise, we'll take it offline.
Yeah, we can always take things off, Madhav.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess.
Can I go next?
You want to
Can
go
I
next?
go next?
Yes, yes, Ishita.
Yeah, thank you, Kanchan and Mukesh, for this webinar. My question is how the non-human identity are being managed in the systems.
Okay. Sure. So Ishita, so Mukesh, I can take this one.
Yes.
So Ishita, Mukesh actually showed very briefly the reconciliation screen, right? And he also spoke about the orphan accounts. So basically, the accounts which are there existent in the applications, but then those accounts or those users are not there in IDPs, and basically that means that those users are not really real human users because they are not the identities which are present in IDP. So such accounts are surfaced in the reconciliation page in Identity Confluence, and then you have an option to mark those accounts, if at all they are non-human identities, as non-human identity. And when you are performing an action of marking any account as non-human identity, we also give you the facility to provide certain metadata along with it. For example, you can assign some human owner to non-human identity, so that human identity or owner is responsible to take care of that NHI's credential rotation and these other aspects, right? Then you can identify whether this NHI is having privilege access in the application. So such metadata as well can be provided when you are identifying a certain identity as a non-human identity. And then there is some additional functionality in terms of review access reviews for NHIs. So it's not just user access reviews are not just for human identities in the organization, but they can also be done for non-human identity. So that is how the non-human identity management is being done in Identity Confluence.
Okay.
Does
Yeah.
that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Ishita. Akash, you want to go next?
Yes. So if there is a cyber attack happening, okay, so how can Identity Confluence help mitigate that attack? And in both scenarios, if the attack is happening, how it can help mitigate in the current scenarios when the attack is happening, and the second scenario is how it can help when the attack is already over.
Okay. So, I mean, we are talking about two things. One is attack prevention, cyber attack prevention, and second one is forensics, right? Which is
Yes.
the post attack that we are talking about, right? So, I mean, we are talking about general overall security, cyber security framework, and we are not talking about, we are only talking about identity security posture, right? We are not talking about firewalls and some of the other core networking stuff that is needed for cyber security, right? But both these pieces, right? Your infra level security protection as well as your identity security posture, right? Both go hand in hand, right? So if, for example, right, we can Identity Confluence can push your identity related event logs, right, to your same system, and the same SIEM system can receive multiple logs, logs from multiple sources like your firewall, your API gateways, right? If there is a DDoS account, right? So how does it mean? Then your SIEM system, right, can correlate your identity related information and your API, your network and infra level information and bring out anomalies, right? For example, right, if there is a DDoS account and which is using a legitimate user account from your system, right? Now, the account was compromised, right? In this case, right? How do we know that information, right? Because now your SIEM has this information that can flow in from your identity confluence, right? It can know that this user has certain privileges, right? And this is an anomaly that he should not be using the system, right? From an odd IP address, right? So basically, net, we do not directly do this. We do not prevent this cyber attack directly, but we can provide the intelligence that is needed by the SIEM system to protect this attack, right? Again, the second part wherein forensics, right? Since we have all of this information in terms of who has access to what, again, this can help in forensics, but again, it has to marry with the other infra level logs, right? That would still be needed, right? Without the identity confluence. Hope that helps answer.
Thanks, Manish.
Yeah, I can't.
Hey, Raj.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to know like how this dormancy is calculated in IC.
Okay, so see, basically the dormant accounts will you typically have access to logs, right? So when a user has logged on to a certain application, that information is available with you. And if user has not been using that account for say certain number of days, or if that particular entitlement is not exercised for certain number of days, it would mean that that user account is dormant. So Mukesh, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, there are two types of application. One is if your application is already using SSO or you're connected to your identity system, core identity authentication framework, right? So, for example, Okta Intra, right? If you are using Okta Intra or AD, right, for authenticating an user against an application, we pull the information from them, right? In other cases where these applications are not connected to an SSO source, right, we can feed in the access logs from those systems, right? But the first one, which is like a lot of mature organizations are moving towards, right, having an SSO. So we kind of tap into those systems to get that information for dormancy.
Okay.
Sure.
I think.
Madhav, you have another question?
Yes, in connection with earlier question of cybersecurity. Now, the similar thing as Mukesh said, you need to marry this with the other data. So, do you have any sort of provision in the product where I can configure some of the unexpected events? Like for an example, if particular user who is operating from India suddenly starts logging from Europe. Now this is just an information capture, but if I can get it from two ways, either it's a information capture sent to same and they will integrate it with their whatever mechanism. Second way is to kind of raise an alert so it gets noticed. Now whether to act upon that or ignore it, it's a different story. But can I have, instead of just pushing the logs to the system being integrated with this, can I raise an event kind of thing or alert kind of thing? Typically, when we install something, our antivirus raises an alert that it finds something which may be malicious. Now it's up to us whether to ignore it or act upon it. Similarly, any sort of events. Now login from different region or time zone is one of the things. DDoS one which Mukesh rightly said about. So do we have this sort of configuration? This is
No.
one part. And second part is, can we detect it and block it kind of temporarily. For an example, if I'm checking the open ports and the target operating system is Linux, and if I start checking the ports in a sequential manner, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Linux kernel thinks that this is a port scan attack and it blocks it.
Okay.
Similar kind of configuration do we have, or does it make sense to have?
Okay. So now the question is, can we do things like, what we are talking about is SIEM analytics, right? Basically, building patterns on top of your SIEM logs, right? And raising alerts. Can we do it? Yeah, we can do it. But do we want to do it, or is it in the scope of the work that we have? We are we are targeting? No. But what we had, as I said earlier, right? We want to marry, but we don't want to do things that other tools are very good at, right? So, for example, what we do is, in this case, what we do is we have log forwarder, so we can forward the logs to any SIEM analytics system, and there are a lot of SIEM analytics systems available out there, right? And people can build patterns, right, in these SIEM analytics systems.
Mhm.
The other place where you talked about how do you remediate it, right? Akash also in a brief talk, since we can do automated provisioning, right? We can deprovision that user for a certain period if we think that, if the SIEM system detects a pattern that this IP address, right, that this user is using is malicious, seems malicious, right? They can trigger our system to block access to that for that user temporarily, right? So that he will not be able to access these systems for a certain period of time. But that we can do, right? But we don't detect this. Pattern detection is out of our scope, right? But we can integrate with these SIEM analytics tools, right? And if that makes sense, right? But essentially, we kind of have drawn boundaries. We don't want to do what your SIEM analytics tools can do well, right? But we want to integrate with them. That's how we look at it from our product roadmap perspective.
Okay. So I was thinking this from the point that as you are into identity, so any data which is related to identity domain, the intelligence or patterns for that matter, probably, just so I thought, may
Yeah,
lie into
it
your
makes
domain.
sense. See, what we have seen is it always makes sense to have the SIEM analytics on a holistic data, right? Firewall network identity. People don't have even today, these SIEM analytics uses log forwarders from your typical infra items, right? Be it your API gateway, firewalls, right? So this is what feeds in this SIEM analytics tool, right? There are very few people who kind of also use the identity level logs, right? And we kind of provide that, but we don't want to get into, it's not in our roadmap, because we think that having this analysis done in isolation really does not fulfill the purpose.
Okay.
Yeah. I see Sumodh has raised the hand.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
You.
Hi. So you talked about access governance, right? And different compliance standards. So how identity conflicts helps in audits exactly? Audits like SOC 2 or ISO 27001.
Oh, that's actually a very relevant and good question. So, because we did not explicitly cover it as part of this webinar, because this webinar had a focus on identity security posture management, right? But for supporting audits in the organizations, we have a feature which we call as evidence center. And evidence center is a very powerful feature because all these known compliances, right? SOC 2, ISO, SAMA, NIST, PCI-DSS. So what we have done is we have worked with various consultants, and we have figured out what are the reports which are really required to face these audits and which come in the purview of IGS system. And we have made these reports available out of the box through our evidence center, and that basically helps the teams which are preparing for these audits, right? So it really saves time for them, because otherwise these teams really take enormous time in preparing these reports when audit comes closer. But these reports are handy, they can be downloaded out of the box, and I'm sure that that feature is sort of a boon for the teams who are preparing for the audits in the organizations. So I would say we have a very direct support to face these audits for these compliance standards.
Yeah, thanks, Kanchan. That sounds pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
We're looking
sure.
forward to a webinar on that one.
Okay, definitely. Okay, so I think we are reaching top of the hour. So I would like to thank all of you to take out time from your busy schedules to attend Tech Prescient's webinar on identity security posture, and looking forward for similar attendance in our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.